Upon glancing at my phone, I noticed a staggering 13 missed calls, all originating from my persistent mother-in-law, Martha. Not again, I thought to myself. Just as I was contemplating this influx of calls, my phone vibrated once more. Answering the call, I was met with Martha's angered voice demanding, "Excuse me, isn't the allowance for this month $3,000 due?" "Excuse me?" I responded, trying to keep my composure. "Send the allowance. This month's payment hasn't been deposited yet." Martha raged on, completely indifferent to my circumstances and solely fixated on her own desires. Fed up with her lack of consideration, even in challenging situations, I reluctantly resorted to my last option. Pulling myself together, I blurted out, "Your son has passed away, so I can no longer send the allowance. My name is Jennifer Smith, 32 years old. I'm a busy working woman at a major financial firm and also a housewife." Reflecting on my past, I reminisced about meeting my beloved husband Mark 2 years ago. We connected through our shared hobbies, and our relationship blossomed quickly. Despite encountering no major quarrels, a significant issue arose in the form of Martha, my mother-in-law. Mark's father had passed away a few years ago, leaving Martha as his sole family. The trouble began when I visited Martha's home to introduce myself before our wedding. Martha greeted me with a displeased expression, remarking, "So, you're Mark's fiancé, huh?" "Yes, my name is Jennifer Miller." To my astonishment, she continued, "You're a rather plain girl. I wonder what Mark sees in you." Uncertain if she was joking or being serious, I was left in shock. Mark, noticing my discomfort, confronted his mother. "Hey, Mom, what's with the sudden harsh words? How can you say such things to the person I chose?" Martha responded, "I'm just trying to choose a suitable woman for you." An argument unfolded between mother and son, leaving the air heavy with tension during my first meeting with Martha. I found myself unable to intervene, even though the atmosphere remained awkward. Eventually, we managed to convey our intention to marry. As we were leaving, Martha called out to Mark, sounding somewhat disgruntled. "Mark, can I have a word? You're going to keep that promise after you get married, right?" "What promise?" Mark inquired. "You know, about the allowance." "Ah, that. Yes, I'll be sure to take care of that." "Can we not discuss it here, please?" Mark replied. While leaving, the tension between my husband and his mother lingered, and the air was thick with discomfort. In the car on the way home, I brought up the conversation Mark had with his mom. "Hey, Mark, about the conversation you had with your mom as we were leaving." "Yeah, I should have told you about it, Jennifer. I heard something about an allowance. After my dad passed away, I've been sending money to my mom every month." "How much?" I asked. $2,000. $2,000. I couldn't help but raise my voice in surprise. Mark sighed deeply and explained, "Actually, my mom has a debt from a casino a long time ago. She's still paying it off, and because her health isn't great these days, she spends a lot of time at home. But she still needs money to live on, right?" "But $2,000? Isn't that a bit too much? If I try to lower the amount, she keeps calling me over and over. And no matter what, a mother is still a mother. I worry about her living alone," Mark reasoned. I understood that Mark was genuinely devoted to his mother. Since his father passed away, Martha had been the only family he had left. Regardless of her character, she was still his beloved mother. 2 months after our wedding, during my lunch break, I received a call from Martha on my smartphone. When I answered, she began to speak in a cheerful tone. "Jennifer, long time no see. Can we chat for a bit?" "Yes. What can I do for you?" I asked. "Well, I was hoping you could start sending me money," Martha said. I was taken aback and struggled to find words. However, Martha seemed excited to continue the conversation. "You mentioned before that you're working for a financial company, right? That means you have a good salary, doesn't it?" "Not exactly." "What, are you lying to avoid giving me money?" "That's not what I mean," I replied. "Then what is it?" "But Martha, you're still receiving financial support from Mark, aren't you?" I asked. In defiance, Martha responded, "So what?" Jennifer sternly stated what she felt Martha was not appreciating. Martha, receiving $2,000 in monthly support is a big deal, and yet you're asking for more. Really? You think so? If you were to send me an additional $1,000, I could avoid burdening Mark. What do you mean by that? I asked. Well, I have Mark as a guarantor for my debts. If I fail to make payments, the debt collectors will go after him. Do you understand? Martha explained. But aren't you using part of Mark's $2,000 to pay back the debt? I inquired. I'm short. I haven't told Mark, but I have a significant amount of debt, Martha confessed. From her tone, it was apparent that this was a fact even her husband was unaware of. Having children in the future would increase our expenses. In addition to that, taking over Martha's debt was not an easy task. However, if Martha's payments fall behind and the debt falls onto Mark, the interest will likely have accumulated significantly by that time. If I refused to send money, it would eventually become a problem for my husband as well. Thinking along those lines, I reluctantly agreed to Martha's proposal. All right, I'll start sending you money. Really? Good, Jennifer. I knew you would say that. The total, with Mark's contribution, will be $3,000. But this means you can pay off your debt, right? Yes, of course. I should be able to pay it all off in about a year. You promise, right? You'll make sure to pay off all your debts. I get it. So I'll be expecting it from this month onwards. Martha concluded the call abruptly. Physical exhaustion from work combined with this emotional burden only added to my stress. $1,000 a month, that's going to be rough. But it's also to prevent future problems for us. After all, if Martha can't make a living, it will upset Mark as well. That night, I promptly reported the matter to my husband. He told me I didn't have to do this, but I had already given my word to Martha, and it was a decision made for our future well-being. Mark expressed his gratitude and understanding, even as he maintained a sorry expression throughout. Time flew by, and 2 years have passed since then. The financial aid we thought would end in a year is still ongoing, and even now, we are transferring $3,000 every month to Martha. What's more, about 2 months ago, Mark fell ill and has been unable to go to work. He's on sick leave, so he's receiving disability benefits, but it's a mere pittance compared to his previous salary. Last month, I managed to transfer $3,000 to Martha from my savings, but it would be very challenging if this situation continues. Unbelievably, Martha has not once come to visit her sick son. We have informed her of his hospitalization, but she doesn't show up to see him and only contacts me to ask, "You're still sending the money, right?" I was so furious that I decided to address the issue with Mark. Mark, listen, don't you think it's wrong that Martha is only concerned about money, even though you're in such a state? We need to think seriously about what to do going forward. Yeah, I've been thinking the same thing. I don't want to put more strain on you, Jennifer. This month, too, she's been bombarding me with calls and messages, asking if we've sent the money yet. Are you serious? How can she only think about money when her own son is sick? Mark expressed his anger towards his mother, his face slightly worn. Then, as if he had an idea, Mark exclaimed, "That's it," and wore a sly grin. What is it, Mark? Well, this is our last resort. I've come up with something good. For your mom. What? I was curious but cautious. Mark suggested a plan that I could never have imagined. Although it could be called inappropriate, it seemed to be the only way to make Martha understand. A few weeks later, Mark was discharged from the hospital. Martha didn't reply to any of our messages, so we didn't inform her about Mark's discharge. In the last 2 weeks, Martha had been relentlessly demanding money, displaying no concern for her son's well-being. While Mark and I were enjoying a cup of tea, a message came in on my phone. Upon checking, I found 13 missed calls from Martha again. As I thought, my phone vibrated again. It was another call from Martha. Hello, I answered and turned on the speaker microphone so that Mark could hear. Martha started shouting right away. Listen, where's the $3,000 for this month? Excuse me, that's right. The money for this month hasn't been transferred yet, I replied. Do you realize Mark is now? I don't care if he's in the hospital or whatever. It's none of my business. You're working at a good place, right? You must have plenty of savings. Hurry up and transfer it here, Martha shouted angrily. Eventually, she said something unbelievable. Listen, since you married Mark, if he can't pay, you have to pay me. Understand? If you refuse, I'll make you the guarantor. Got it? At that moment, something inside me snapped. She was displaying her desires openly without considering our situation at all. I had reached my breaking point with her. She didn't even try to reflect on her own actions. Now, I had no choice but to resort to the last resort. I firmly declared into my smartphone, Mark has passed away. I can't send you any more money. At these words, Martha blurted out in bafflement, what? Yes, this was the last resort that my husband suggested. Lied to Martha about Mark's death and observe her reaction. If she showed any sign of sadness, if she reflected on her behavior and apologized, we would continue to support her financially. But if she didn't reflect, if she demanded money, we would sever ties completely. Deep down, I knew it was time to confront Martha's blatant disregard for the well-being of her own family. I believed that even someone as money-driven as Martha would deeply reflect on her actions upon hearing that her own son had passed away. However, the very next moment, Martha burst into loud laughter. What's so funny? I questioned. Well, isn't it obvious? If Mark is dead, that means his inheritance will be distributed to me too. Excuse me, I've been looking into it since I heard that Mark was sick. Listen here, 2/3 of Mark's assets are yours, but 1/3 is mine. I was at a loss for words. I never anticipated that when she first heard her son was sick, she wouldn't look into treatment, but into how the inheritance would be divided. My anger surpassed. I was simply dumbfounded. My husband seemed to feel the same way, and as our eyes met, he slowly nodded. This was the signal to continue with the plan. Once again, I said to Martha in a strong tone, Martha, did you hear what I said? Mark is dead. I heard. What about it? Aren't you sad your own son passed away before you? Martha replied nonchalantly, you just make sure to send me some. I won't let you get away with not doing it. With a click, the phone line was cut off, and a dial tone echoed. I glanced at my husband and saw that he was shaking, his face red with anger. Mark, are you okay? I asked. My husband looked into my eyes and said, I'm cutting ties with her. She'll likely come here eventually, demanding money. Let's wait until then, okay? But are you really okay with this, cutting off ties just like that? Yeah, I have no regrets. After that call, she's no mother. My husband's eyes were filled with hatred, and I felt the same way. A person who only thinks about money over her own son's life is not family to me. A few days later, as expected, Martha came to our house. For the time being, I decided to hide my husband in the next room and deal with Martha myself. Martha approached me with a face like a demon. Hey, give me Mark's inheritance right now. Again with that? Anything else to say? He's already dead, isn't he? It's pointless to say anything now. Yet you never even visited him. What are you saying? Are you really his mother? You're so annoying. Give me the inheritance right away. I don't mind getting the lawyer. Speaking more would be a waste of time. Just as I thought that, my husband emerged from the next room. Seeing him, Martha let out a startled gasp as if she had seen a ghost. Mark, why weren't you dead? Long time no see, Mom. Sorry, but the news about my death was a lie. A lie? How could you be so disrespectful? I wanted to confirm your true nature, Mom. I was curious about how you'd handle the allowance if your son died. But you turned out to be a gold digger, just as I suspected. I understood perfectly. What? How dare you call your mother a gold digger? Silence. I'm cutting ties with a toxic parent like you. My husband's angry shouts left Martha with her mouth agape. She couldn't come to terms with the fact that her own son was severing ties with her. "What does this mean, Mark?" she stammered. "It means exactly what I said. I can't consider someone like you as my mother. No way." "What about the allowance? Do you really think I would? You're on your own with the debts. We're moving. Wait, please. If you do that, what about my living expenses?" Teary-eyed and pleading, Martha reached out to my husband. He forcefully shook off her hand, looked at her coldly, and said, "I don't care about your living expenses. You have been living off us without even a single apology. I really understand your despicable nature now. Don't you dare show up in front of us again." "No, wait, Mark. Are you going to abandon your mother?" Ignoring her words, my husband grabbed Martha's arm and dragged her to the front door. He threw her shoes and bag outside and chased Martha out of the house. Martha made a fuss outside for a while but disappeared after a bit, perhaps unable to withstand the eyes of the neighbors. She tried contacting us multiple times, but we ignored all of her attempts. We set Martha's number to be automatically rejected, and we finished moving. Regarding the matter of co-signing for the debts, it became invalid since Martha had made Mark the co-signer without his consent, and therefore he was not responsible. Without the allowance from us, Martha seemed to be leading a miserable life. It's only natural, considering she had been using the allowance for her gambling habits instead of paying off her debts. She still had a mountain of debts and was chased by debt collectors every day. Unable to gamble anymore, she seems to be working from dawn to dusk. For the foreseeable future, it's unlikely that she will be able to pay off her debts completely. She will have to keep working until she is unable to move. This is entirely her own doing. As for us, we are spending fulfilling days in our new home. My husband's condition has stabilized, and he has returned to work. After some time, there's a new life growing in my belly. We're going to have an additional member in our family next year. From now on, we want to spend happy days as a family of 3. She proved to be such a nuisance, always obstructing my path. Right up until the bitter end, my husband spat out those words. It made me question if he was truly human at all. He was insufferable, not only as a parent, but as a person. "I'm sorry. I will avenge you," I declared, standing before the funeral attendees, reading the letter left by my daughter. As I read, my husband's face turned ashen. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" my father-in-law's angry voice echoed. The revenge was about to commence. "My name is Elma, a 40-year-old housewife. I've been married to Carl for 15 years. We met in high school, becoming classmates in our sophomore year. We started talking after becoming desk mates and grew closer while working together on a school festival project. After the festival ended, he confessed, and we started dating. We continued dating through college. Carl moved out on his own, so I often visited his apartment. After graduation, we both started working and got busy, but we still made time for dates and meals out. Once we both started earning more, we enjoyed traveling during our holidays. I cherished those trips we took while dating. 3 years into our working lives, we decided to get married. We had saved enough for a wedding and had settled into our jobs, so it felt like the right time. Since we had dated since high school, we already knew each other's families, which made meeting the parents and house visits go smoothly. Many people attended our wedding, including our high school classmates, celebrating our union. Afterward, we started our married life, which was full of joy. Even though we'd been together for over 8 years since high school, we felt fresh and excited in our married life. It felt real when my last name changed to his. We were having a smooth marriage. 3 years later, our daughter Rosa was born. "Wow, she looks like an angel, so cute," Carl exclaimed, holding our newborn daughter. "I'll work my butt off to protect our family," he declared. "Thank you, be our rock," I replied. "You can count on me," he assured confidently. With a new member to protect, my husband seemed larger than life and very reliable. After giving birth, I worked part-time in his company. The first reason was to have more time with our child. Raising her was incredibly joyful. Every little milestone, like crawling or walking, was a moment of excitement, and I took countless photos and videos, like any proud parent. When I told Carl, he'd say, "I wish I could have seen that," with a tinge of regret. We spent blissful days playing with our daughter on his days off. As Rosa grew, she became conversational. We loved taking her to different places and letting her have various experiences. We were excited about thinking of her future dreams and the path she would take. But everything changed when Rosa was in the 3rd grade. I was working part-time when suddenly I got a call from the hospital. Rosa had collapsed during class. In a state of panic, I hurried to the hospital. My husband left work early to join me, and together we listened to the doctor's solemn words. That's when the shocking truth hit us like a tidal wave. Our daughter had a rare disease. Depending on the treatment, she probably had about a year to live, the doctor explained. My mind went blank. My daughter was burdened with an incurable illness. All that awaited us was the use of medication to ease the symptoms, with no guarantee of halting the relentless progression of the disease. We were devastated, grappling with the harsh reality of why such a small child had to endure this cruel fate. As time passed, her condition worsened. 6 months later, walking became a challenge, and she could no longer attend school. Our days were consumed by hospital visits and lying in bed at home. Gradually, she became bedridden. I had to quit my part-time job to care for her full-time. It was a necessary sacrifice, as anything could happen while I was away. Supporting her became our top priority. Around this time, my husband's demeanor underwent a drastic change. He easily fell into bad moods, and the atmosphere at home grew tense. When I welcomed him home with dinner, he'd respond with irritation, questioning my choice of fish. His complaints about every little thing persisted. The house felt peaceful and calm when it was just my daughter and me, but anxiety crept in whenever he was around. His irritability escalated, and he started coming home late, citing overtime work. Strangely, I felt relief when he stayed out late. The mental exhaustion lifted. Yet, I couldn't shake the loneliness. He had stopped caring about our daughter's well-being. When I implored him to talk to her more, he dismissed it, claiming fatigue and declaring that taking care of her during the day was enough. 2 years had passed since her diagnosis, and she continued to fight against her illness with unwavering spirit. Despite her strength, my husband refused to acknowledge her efforts. Instead, his overtime increased, and he started staying out overnight without a message to me. The days without him felt strangely comfortable, even when he was home. Our interactions were minimal, and he seemed to sense the tension, avoiding unnecessary conversations. Strangely, my daughter, in the midst of her struggle, noticed the growing distance between us. "Did you and Dad fall out?" she asked one day. "You hardly ever talk when you're together, right?" "Most of the time." I could hear voices, and it sounded like they were arguing. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to worry you, but it's okay. We're not on bad terms, really." "Yes, true. Dad's just really busy with work, so when he's home, he's resting. That's why I don't talk to him much so he can get some rest." I reassured our daughter. "Oh, I see," she responded, a little relieved but still seeming sad that her dad wasn't talking to her much. "Did Dad start to dislike me after I got sick?" she asked with a hint of worry. "That's not true at all. A parent can't hate their child. Like I said, he's just busy with work. Don't worry, he doesn't hate you, okay?" I comforted her. After putting our daughter to bed and leaving her room, I sighed. Why am I causing her to worry like this? She's in a life-or-death situation, and I'm troubling her with this. Gathering my courage, I spoke to my husband when he came home. "Hey, Rosa is feeling lonely. She's wondering if you started to dislike her after she got sick," I admitted. My husband, who had been listening reluctantly, seemed surprised that our daughter would say such a thing and finally looked at me. "Yes, she did. So please, even if it's just a little, talk to her. She's lived past the life expectancy she was given, so it wouldn't be strange if we lost her anytime. Let's make sure neither of you has any regrets, okay?" I pleaded. "I got it," he said begrudgingly and in a low voice. The next day, being Sunday, I deliberately created time for just my husband and daughter to be together. I went out to the store for a couple of hours. When I returned home, I asked him, "Did you get to talk to Rosa?" He replied, "Yeah, we talked about various things. I was glad if it was for our daughter's sake. But then my husband started to get ready to go out." "Are you going somewhere?" I inquired. "Yeah, I'm going out to eat with a friend. Why don't we all have dinner together as a family?" I suggested. "Ah, I've been invited, so I can't say no. I've done my part by talking to Rosa. It's time for you to let me go." Saying that, he left the house, leaving me puzzled. What does he mean by "let me go"? I felt like nothing had been resolved. Maybe my husband was just going through the motions out of obligation. At that moment, I decided to stop expecting anything from him. It was enough if I cherished our daughter. That's what I thought. I focused more on making conversation with her. Then, one day, my husband came home in a bad mood. "Hey, get dinner ready quickly," he demanded. I had stopped trying to say anything to my husband, so I prepared dinner, put it in front of him, and was about to go to our daughter's room when he stopped me. "Hey, pack a week's worth of clothes in the duffel bag. I've got a business trip. Make sure you pack all the essentials, like the razor too." After saying that, he went to take a bath without even clearing his dishes. Why do I have to do this? But surely if the bag wasn't packed by the time he got out of the bath, he would get pretty mad, and if he raised his voice, it would worry our daughter. If she woke up, I sighed and went into his room to pack the clothes into the duffel bag. Well, it's a relief. He'll be gone on a business trip for a week. With him gone, I can relax. I packed the bag and left it in his room. The next morning, my husband left without thanking me or saying anything. That annoyed me, but I decided to let myself do as I pleased. First, I called my parents to come and see our daughter. If my husband is away for a week, my folks can stay over without any worry. They seemed torn, happy to see their granddaughter, but saddened to see her bedridden. They were all smiles in front of her. But once she fell asleep, their faces were filled with pain and loneliness. "It really is unfair of God," they said. "Why couldn't it be an old-timer like me instead of a good kid like Rosa?" My parents stayed until the very last minute before my husband was due back. As time went on, Rosa's condition worsened, and she had to be hospitalized. I was gripped with fear that the inevitable might be near. I visited her in the hospital every day, but my husband never came. Instead, when he returned home early, he sent angry messages on WhatsApp, upset about dinner not being ready. At this point, beyond sighing, I thought it might be better without a husband who couldn't cherish his own daughter. However, his work, painful as it was to admit, allowed me these moments with her. Not only my parents but also my in-laws came to visit her often at the hospital. Rosa always seemed happy when someone came to see her. We even celebrated her 12th birthday in the hospital room, where the nurses prepared a cake, and we all celebrated together. But about a month after her birthday, Rosa's condition worsened, and she passed away. I was devastated, breaking down in tears. The reality shattered my emotions. My parents tried to comfort me, but they ended up crying with me. Still, we had to see Rosa off properly. Together with my parents, I arranged and prepared for the funeral. There were things I had to do, all for Rosa. I managed to hold back my tears and proceed with the funeral arrangements. We arrived at the funeral parlor early before the other mourners. My husband, irritable about having to get up early after coming back from his business trip the day before, was infuriating. He hadn't been reachable when Rosa passed away, and he had the gall to say, "I was on a business trip. Even if you had contacted me, I could have made it back." He tried to light a cigarette in frustration. "Go to the smoking area, please," I said sharply. Tutting, he looked irritated. After I called him out, standing by the coffin on his way to smoke, he said something awful to our sleeping daughter. "You were such a pain, always in my way, right to the end." My husband spat out these cruel words as if they were nothing. Is he really human? He was the worst, not just as a parent, but as a person. I was rendered speechless by the horrible things he said. I couldn't move from the spot until my husband walked towards the smoking area. When I came to, I went straight to the coffin. "I'm sorry. I will take revenge in your place," I told my daughter, steeling myself with determination. I could never forgive him. Then the funeral began. Unbelievably, my husband, who had just said such terrible things, pretended to cry in front of the relatives, saying Rose's name as tears streamed down his face. I knew it was an act because I saw him apply eye drops before walking up to the coffin. The relatives, not knowing any better, misunderstood and started crying too. Unforgivable. I would reveal his true nature no matter what. As the funeral was drawing to a close, it was time to read the letter left by my daughter. What? There's a letter. My husband was clearly surprised, not having known about it. Yes, there is. I have to properly convey the words she left behind to everyone. I stood before the funeral attendees and began to read my daughter's letter aloud at the microphone. The letter was mostly words of gratitude to me for the care I had given her. With each word I read, tears came and I choked up. The relatives also started to cry along. But as I got to the part about my husband, I took a deep breath. To Dad, I read, as the tears naturally stopped. Against Mom, who was always by my side, you seemed to avoid coming home as if you were avoiding us. Even when you came home, all I could hear was your voice yelling at her in my room. Dad used to make time to play with me when I was little, taking me on drives to all sorts of places. But after I got sick and became bedridden, Dad seemed like a completely different person. Mom always pretended to be strong in front of me, but I could tell she was really struggling with how Dad was behaving. It hurt me, thinking maybe it was my fault things turned out this way. But it seems that wasn't the case. Remember the day Mom went shopping, and it was just Dad and me at home. You came to my room and talked to me. Then, maybe because Mom asked you to, I was so happy. It felt like the old Dad had come back. But then, thinking I was asleep, you took the phone call. You were talking to a woman. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I know everything. You were planning a week-long trip. Did you enjoy the Disney trip you went on behind our backs? And you told that woman on the phone that you loved her. As I read my daughter's letter aloud, the room buzzed with tension. My husband stood there, pale as a ghost. What the hell are you doing? My father-in-law's angry voice boomed. The revenge had begun. My husband just stood there, speechless, stuttering. Ah! My father-in-law grabbed him by the collar and yelled, "You fool!" before striking him across the face. My husband, staggering, denied the affair, saying, "It's not what it looks like. There must be some mistake." What's the mistake? Rosa would never lie, but I haven't had an affair. My husband stuck to his denials, holding the microphone. I've already caught you. Stop with the futile resistance. Yes, I had seen my daughter's letter beforehand and hired a private investigator. I had gathered plenty of evidence of my husband's affair. I showed the photo on my smartphone to everyone at the funeral. All the relatives attending glared at my husband. How could you go on an affair trip when your own child's life was hanging by a thread? You're finished as a human being. I didn't raise you to be such a terrible adult. Mom, Dad, you're no son of ours anymore. We disown you. My husband just collapsed on the spot, trying to escape the pain. I didn't want to face the reality that my daughter had become like that. What are you even saying? That's no excuse for having an affair. And if that were true, you would have spent more time with Rosa. Don't lie now when we've come so far. And I heard from your parents. You were asking them for money for Rosa's medical expenses because it was so costly. I never heard a word about it. That means you were using the money your parents sent for your own pleasure, right? You exploited your daughter's illness to collect money and have an affair, didn't you? Don't give me that. How dare you do such low things and then talk about suffering? Rosa was the one suffering the most, fighting desperately to survive her illness. To have a father like you, Rosa was the one to be pitied. You're not wanted at this funeral. Get out of here right now. I shouted at my husband with all my might. He fell on his butt, let out a small yelp, and then hurriedly ran away from the place. After that, I reset and continued with my daughter's funeral. When it was over, my in-laws apologized deeply and offered to help with the divorce and alimony in any way they could. I proceeded with the divorce and demanded alimony through a lawyer introduced by my father-in-law. But that wasn't enough for me. I took the house my husband had bought and also told everyone at his workplace about what he had done. My ex-husband, who had made it to the position of manager, quickly lost all credibility at the company. He was demoted and sent to work in a remote location. He asked his affair partner to come with him, but she promptly dumped him, saying she had no interest in a man without money. In the end, to his affair partner, my ex-husband was just a rich plaything. My ex-husband was abandoned by his parents and relatives, left to work alone in a distant place, living a lonely life in his house. It's all what he deserves, and honestly, I'd like to beat him up to my heart's content if I could. Meanwhile, I sold the house I got from my ex-husband and moved back to my parents' house. With the alimony from my ex-husband and his affair partner, I had a considerable amount of money. I didn't feel like working for a while after my daughter passed away, but gradually, I started to think more positively and began working part-time at a cafe near my parents' house. Mom's homemade cake. Rosa loved it so much. I remember my daughter saying that. Now, I bake sweets every day while working at the cafe and honing my pastry skills. I hope to one day serve my own creations on the menu, and just like how my daughter was happy eating my cake, I want to see someone else smiling while eating my cake. For my daughter's sake, I have to live my life to the fullest. With that thought, I put my all into working towards my dream. Today, thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. If you resonated with the content, please leave a positive rating and a comment.